everyone to the Zebulon Board of Commissioners meeting, December 5th, 2022. Prior to bringing this meeting to order, I would like to have a moment of silence for the passing of our former mayor, Bob Matheny. Condolences to his family and appreciation for his service to this community and his sacrifice. He served with dignity and integrity. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. We will have the Pledge of Allegiance by our student of the month, Ms. Demaya Edmondson. Would you come lead us, please? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Prior to approval of the agenda, we will need to add a closed session tonight concerning property acquisition to the agenda. Are there any others?
Yes, Mayor, I have one.
Commissioner Baxter.
A reconsideration of the meeting time for our work sessions, please.
Okay, that would go under.
I'm sorry, Mayor York. We were going to be talking about meeting times and dates, so you could look at it at the same time later in the meeting.
This says 2024 meeting schedule. Will 2023 meetings be included?
Go ahead, Jim.
You can introduce it as a revision if you'd like at that time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Miles.
Yes, I'd like to pull from consent ordinance 2023-16 park suspension ordinance.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I second.
All in favor? Motion passes. We have school recognition. Mr. Meyer? The town of Zebulon recognizes Demaya Edmondson of the Zebulon Elementary School for being an outstanding student and a role model for her peers. Demaya is an extraordinary student, born in the city of Raleigh, where she resides in Zebulon with her parents and her brother and sister. She is determined to be successful in all aspects of life. Recognition as an honor roll student for the first quarter of this school year is an expectation for Demaya. She was the winner of the 5th grade DARE essay contest in 2022. Her goal for the future is to go to NC State and get her degree in education and to be a kindergarten teacher. Zebulon Elementary School is for outstanding student and role model to Ms. Demaya Edmondson. Next, for the teacher of the month, Ms. Mallory Curley. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, sir, Mallory.
Mallory goes above and beyond to build a collaborative classroom environment with her students. She advocates for her students through the MTSS process. As SIP chair, she has challenged many of the procedures and structures throughout the Zebulon Elementary School, always seeking a solution to issues that may arise. Ms. Curley uses all available data sets to determine best scenarios to improve students' outcome. Ms. Curley's tenacity and passion has earned her the title of Teacher of the Year at Zebulon Elementary School. She has developed a student ambassador program where students in the upper grades support their younger peers to help close academic and learning gaps. Zebulon Elementary is a better place because of the impact of Ms. Curley has on her students, teachers, and family. The town of Zebulon recognizes Mallory Curley of Zebulon Elementary School for her dedication to the school and its students. Zebulon Elementary is a better place because of the impact Mrs. Curley has on her students and teachers and families. Next, we will have public comment. Looks like we have one sign-in, public comment. Mr. Michael Germano.
My name is Michael Germano, 616 Golden Plum Lane. I'm before the board tonight to publicly refute Commissioner Baxter's blatantly false accusations from a previous Board of Commissioner meeting on November 4th, I believe, stating that I will financially gain or benefit from a planning board decision. So I have yet to receive a response from the letter from Commissioner Baxter. So I would like to read that into public record at this time. So, Commissioner Baxter, I request that you publicly retract your slanderous accusation during the November 7th, 2022 Board of Commissioners meeting that I clearly, the reference planning board member in your statement, stand to financially benefit from a planning board or planning department zoning decision regarding the 125 West Vance Street property. Your statement was baseless hearsay from your unnamed source and deliberately misleading and false, and in no way do I stand to benefit directly or indirectly from this decision. As presented by the staff, this is a zoning map adjustment initiated by the staff, rectifying a building that is divided into different districts by the current map. This baseless claim is an attack on my character and morals, both as a private citizen and a licensed professional. I do not accept this behavior. I expect better, and this town deserves better from its elected officials. Thank you.
public comments? Hearing none. Next, we will move to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
It's moved and second. All in favor? Passes unanimous. Thank you. Old business, planning, public hearing.
I'll make a few comments, kind of reorient everybody and the commissioners on the continuation of the hearing. So as a reminder, this is a continuation of an evidentiary hearing concerning quasi-judicial case number SUP 2023-02, an application for a special use permit filed by Smith Anderson on behalf of the property owner to secure a permit for a multi-building self-storage facility at 901 Proctor Street. As we discussed previously, and as a reminder to the members of the board members must act as impartial decision makers and make their decisions based only on the evidence submitted at last month's hearing and this evening's hearing. The board's decision can't be based on personal preference or facts or evidence outside of the record from tonight's hearing. As in all quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings, no member shall participate or vote on a matter that would violate affected person's constitutional rights to an impartial decision maker. Impermissible conflicts include but are not limited to having a fixed opinion or undisclosed ex parte communications or close familial business or associational relationships with an affected party or financial interest in the outcome. So I asked it last month, I'll ask it again. Has any board member had any undisclosed ex parte communications about this application plan project? Okay. Does any board member have a fixed opinion that's not susceptible to change or other conflict of interest regarding this application or project? Okay, thank you. I won't go through everything because it's a continuation of the hearing. Anybody who wants to offer additional testimony tonight will have the opportunity to do so. As a reminder to those present and to the board, we're here to consider the evidence under the required findings of fact of section 2.2.18F of the UDO. We'll have those up on the screen for everybody to look at as the deliberation and consideration of the case continues. Everybody will be sworn in. If you testify, please stay until the hearing is concluded so that anybody with standing has an opportunity to cross-examine you. If you leave and don't stick around, your testimony may be excluded. So we'll start with Mike and the staff report, then we'll hear from the applicant, and then I'll give anybody else here who wishes to speak for or against the application the opportunity to testify. All right, with that, we'll start with the staff report. Mike, Lisa, we'll swear you in.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
So help me God.
State your name, please.
Michael Clark. Member or mayor, members of the board. As a continuation, tonight's presentation is just going to be a reminder of the details that were discussed at the previous meeting. Specifically, all special use cases have to come back down to 5 standards, which are found in section 2.2.18F of our Unified Development Ordinance. The first is that they will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed. Number 2, it complies with all required standards, conditions, and specifications of this ordinance, including Article 4, as well as Article 5 of the Unified Development Ordinance pertaining to site design, configuration, and architectural standards. 3, will not substantially injure the value of the abutting land or the special use as a public necessity. 4, will be in harmony in the area in which it is to be located. 5, is in general conformity with the town's adopted policy guidance. And then 6, includes a concept plan that accurately depicts the proposed uses configuration. The request is for a multi-structure self-storage facility located at 901 Proctor Street. It has both frontage on Proctor as well as Shepherd School. However, the only point of access is on Shepherd School. Section 4.3.3 lists the two uses that are going to be on this property: self-storage external access only, and then self-storage internal access only. Both of these are classified as a special use within the HC district, which is heavy commercial district. Additional standards, as shown, really deal with the lot configuration, the minimum size, distance from adjacent structures, as well as adjacent land uses, as well as the exterior storage. For time's sake, the applicant, as proposed, does conform with these additional standards found in 4.3.5 subsection QQ2. For the public hearing, which started last month, all of the applicable statutory requirements as well as local best practices were met, including posting on the town's website as well as email notification list. To reconfigure or to reorient yourself to the site, it is near the corner of Shepherd School and Proctor. It does not, however, include that corner parcel. To provide a bit more context, Zebulon Elementary School is located here. This is a little larger, zoomed out. Here is the Arundel 64 interchange property. Currently, the property is vacant, had previously been used for agricultural purposes. And these are the views from the Proctor Street. And this is the adjacent commercial operation right at the corner of Proctor and Shepherd School, and then the adjacent church on Proctor Street. This is the view looking south across the street from Proctor, and then looking north along Shepherd School, showing that both sides of the road are currently vacant. As I noted, the current zoning is heavy commercial, and then the adjacent zonings are primarily residential in nature, including R2, which is a low-density residential classification, and then R13, which is a legacy carryover. It's a residential special use for previous zoning approval. The future land use category does call for this to be suburban commercial, while retaining the residential uses on the parcels across from Shepherd School, as well as the parcels along Proctor adjacent to the site. The concept plan that the applicant proposed did call for two structures. The northernmost structure is 98,000 square feet and would be a interior access self-storage facility. And the southern building is an exterior access building, which is proposed to be 12,650 square feet. It'll have improvements to both frontages along their property lines, including the required landscaping, applicable buffers to the adjacent land uses and land zoning districts and land uses. And this is the elevation for the larger of the two buildings. As previously noted, the 98,000 square foot building does meet the applicable standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. The building that does not meet the applicable standards is the smaller of the two buildings. Principally, this frontage is the frontage that's going to be facing the customer entrance, and the customers themselves are going to be entering into the structure along this facade here. As currently proposed, it does not meet the parameters of section 5.3.1 of the Unified Development Ordinance. Whenever there's also variable questions, if it should be a primary or secondary or tertiary, in situations where it could be either primary or secondary, the ordinance in section 5.3.1 subsection E3 notes that it should go up to the more restrictive, the primary. If it could be tertiary or secondary, subsection 4 of that same section of the UDO indicates that it would go up to a secondary. The UDO does provide graphic examples of how those building frontages should be configured. And as is noted in this example, the primary wall would be here, and our real world example would be this is the primary point of entrance for the customers on this building, where there is no customer entrances on the other sides. Secondary would be supporting features. While there's still some transparency, there's no customer entrances onto the secondary. And the tertiary are typically employee-only accesses, whether it's vehicle access or actual person access into the building. They're restricted only to employees in most contexts, or adjacent to or otherwise non-visible areas. So to recap, primary is the frontage that has the primary customer entrances for that particular structure. Secondary is a supporting facade, and tertiary may have the employee entrances, but not the customer entrances. So as an indicator, that frontage here is what you'd see here, and this is where the customers would be entering into that particular structure. And there are potential conforming options available to bring this into conformance with the applicable sections, such as the inclusion of garage doors that look like storefronts with awnings above them, creating the appearance of a multi-tenant retail establishment, where instead of just the door, it would appear that the actual assemblage of the window or the storefront would actually be the door. So to recap, section 5.3.1 requires customer entrances, building articulation, materials and colors, differentiation of roof forms, and then fenestration. The facade, the primary customer facade located here does not meet these standards per section 5.3.1 of our Unified Development Ordinance. For consideration tonight, if the board finds that the applicant has proven that they have met all of the standards, then the board shall approve the special use permit. Whereas if the board finds that the applicant has not met all of the standards, the board shall deny the special use permit. The options for the board are to conduct or continue the quasi-judicial hearing, deny the request and establish findings of fact, approve the request and establish findings of fact, or if tonight, if you're still unable to determine if the applicable information is available, you'd keep the quasi-judicial hearing open and table to a date certain, which would be recommended for the January meeting. Alternatively, you could close the quasi-judicial hearing tonight and then continue to a date certain. If you do go with option number 5, neither staff nor the applicant would be able to provide any more information, testimony, or documentation pertaining to this request. Staff recommends accepting competent material, substantial evidence, and testimony regarding the special use permit request for the self-storage facility at 901 Proctor Street, subject to the standards listed in section 2.2.18F of the Unified Development Ordinance. And with that, I'm available if you have any questions for staff. Yes.
Commissioner Baxter?
So are there any other options besides the awnings or in the improved doors to bring the project into compliance? Or is that the option that the applicant has?
If they, for strict interpretation of the Unified Development Ordinance, as it stands for section 5.3.1, essentially the 4 images on the screen, if they were able to make the garage doors look similar to that bottom right photo, where it, instead of those being like display windows and doors, if those were be able to made to look like, or if those were garage doors using a spandrel glass type format that has aluminum backing, it would still have that same security view, but it would have that level of appearance. Alternatively, the board could potentially grant deviations from that parameter, subject to other conditions being applied that would still meet the spirit and intent of the applicable regulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Miles?
If you could elaborate a little bit on other deviations, can I give me a little bit more information on that when you state that?
If there was a circumstance where there was a type D buffer completely encasing any visibility of that particular facade. Type D is the most opaque buffer that we have, as well as limited access to that site from from customers, where it would be only restricted to those who actually have rental agreements. That could be a potential deviation. As noted in the current site plan, however, that landscaping is not up to a type D standard.
Commissioner Clark?
On the options of the board, it says approve with conditions and establish findings of fact. So if we give them a condition, they can accept fixing that by either doing or changing the doors, and then that would meet the requirement.
For the increase in landscaping and issuing a deviation from the ordinance, that would have to be specifically spelled out as a proposed condition. If it was a condition just to bring it up to the standards of section 5.3.1, then that would be the window display looking option, where it's actually the spandrel glass doorways.
That would meet the requirement.
That's correct. Either of those options would meet, well, the second would meet the requirements. The first would be a deviation from the requirements. So the landscaping would be a deviation, but that would meet the requirements.
Would meet
That's
the
correct.
requirements. So we can ask the people that are wanting to build it if they would do that.
That's correct. And the attorney for the applicant does also have a presentation and some comments as well.
Laux?
Opinion would be painting window-like structures on those garage doors suffice without the awnings?
Not likely, and part of that is the reflectivity that is created by a glass-like appearance, and most paints don't have that same reflectivity. Additionally, if you go back to the illustration, it's more than just that. With the awnings and the other features, as shown in this rendering or this photo here, if these were garage doors, from a distance, you would never be able to tell. But that's part of it because it's a larger package that includes those awnings and other elements.
Commissioner Baxter?
Is the picture that you have up there that says primary building wall, is that actually representative or an example rather of a building that has had that process done to it, or is that just a picture that you're using for reference?
That's a picture that actually comes from our Unified Development Ordinance. That's actually pedestrian entrances into a multi-tenant retail space.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Commissioner Miles?
With the current plans that they presented, how difficult would this be for the applicant, in your personal opinion, professional opinion, rather?
Financial obligations separate. It's not a very difficult application. In this scenario, you could actually create each of these to be its own independent door, where you would have that aluminum frame rail, similar, it's hard to see here, but similar frame rails there, and then separate material in between, and then having the awnings come up over each of these. So from an architectural perspective, it's very applicable to this scenario. For the site configuration, the type D buffer, they do have it adjacent to the adjacent residential zoning districts. They do not have it along the street, and it'd be a little tricky, but not impossible. You do have a utility easement going through here, and typically you do not plant large shrubs, trees, those type of things on top of a utility easement.
Thank you.
Or relocation of that utility easement elsewhere onto the parcel.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Is the applicant come forward?
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. State your name, please.
My name is James Todd. My address is 150 Fayetteville Street, Suite 2300, Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you, Mayor and council members. We were here for quite a while in November. I think we'll try to be a little bit quicker this evening. The continuance, as I understood it, served a couple of purposes. One was if this board had any questions that came up during your review of the evidence, to give you time to review, certainly a number of pages of material, and then also to address the issue that Mr. Clark just spoke about with the 5.3.1 facade issue. We appreciate planning staff's efforts to provide alternatives to this requirement. But after our review of the UDO, we disagree with the interpretation of the regulation. And part of the reason, if we go back to the distinctions between the different facade types, Mr. Clark made the point that they are determined by whether or not they are customer or employee accessible. And I imagine in practice that that's true, that oftentimes the rear of retail and commercial buildings is employee access only, and the primary and secondary accesses are for customers. But that's not a distinction that the town's UDO makes. In the town's UDO in section 5.3.1, the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary frontages is based on their location their location with respect to the streets that face the building. Primary elevations are defined by facades that face the street that gives the address to the property. In this case, the address is 901 Proctor, and so Proctor Street to the south is the primary elevation. Additional streets or other streets that face the property are secondary frontages. That would be Shepherd School Road in this case. And we'll happily give up the distinction between primary and secondary. We're happy to treat both Shepherd School and Proctor Street as primary facades if the town would like, and I believe that's what we've shown here. Tertiary frontages are all other elevations. This back of building 2 does not face a street. It faces a portion of the driveway of the parking lot, but it does not face a street. It is not a primary or secondary elevation. So we appreciate the alternatives offered by the town, but we are not we're not willing to take on additional cost for an area that is already screened by a type D buffer in a portion of the driveway that is only accessible to paying customers that have key access to a gate and that has a 6 to 8 foot opaque fence along Proctor Street. This is on private property. It does not face a public street. It is not defined by the town's UDO as a primary or secondary elevation. This has been designed to be an attractive, compliant site, but this particular portion of the area is completely screened from the view of anyone that is not a paying customer already. It's designed to be functional, it's designed to be secure, it's designed to be used only by the employees and paying customers of Storage Family LLC. As I said, we're conscious of trying to be good neighbors and good applicants. This is not an intent to get away with something or to violate the UDO. We're more than happy to follow the UDO as it's written. And as we review this, as we review the code, there is no distinction in your UDO between customer accessible and non-accessible. These definitions are defined by reference to the street frontages. This is a tertiary elevation, and our plan as submitted is compliant with a tertiary elevation. At the same time, if the board feels that the only way for this plan to be approved is to do some additional changes to it, Storage Family has put a lot of time, money, and effort into this application. We're not going to allow this one elevation of the smaller building hold up this entire application. But we think it's reasonable, considering all the different steps that go into complying and submitting a good proposal, that we be held to the standards of the UDO, but not above them. And we think we've done that in this case. The concept plan is compliant. Staff's interpretation in this case has missed the mark, but just a little bit. We'd ask to be held to the standards of the UDO. We think we've done that this evening. I'm happy to take questions on the 5.3.1 issue, or certainly anything else that has come up during the board's review of the evidence at the last hearing. We still have, our engineer and our owners in the room. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you again for your time and attention, both in November and then again tonight. Thank you.
Questions, comments from the board? Commissioner Baxter?
It looks to me from this diagram that is up on the screen and on our screens that if you were driving down Proctor, you could potentially look over and see all of the garage doors. Is that not how it's going to be built out?
No, ma'am, I don't think that's going to be the case. So you have a 20-foot type C setback that's shown with the bubbled landscaping there at the bottom of the location. Those black dots above that are an opaque fence that will block the view. And then the type D buffer comes down beyond the extension of that elevation. So is it possible? I mean, I'm not here, I haven't seen the landscaping as it's going to exist on the ground. There is a possibility that there is some angle you could find standing on Proctor where you'll be able to see the garage doors. But the definition of primary and secondary and the diagrams that are depicted in the UDO, we think it's pretty clear given the orientation of this building on the site, the type D buffer that's in place, but really more than the buffers. Even if that buffer didn't exist, this is still an elevation that faces private property. It does not face a street or public recreation lands. We think it's just simply excluded from the definition of secondary or primary because of the plain text of the UDO. So yeah, to your question, certainly possible that you could find an angle through the foliage, through the type D buffer, and through the trees. But with that overwhelming landscaping and buffering, and then the language in the UDO, we just don't think, we think this is clearly a tertiary elevation.
Commissioner Baxter?
Thoughts on what the attorney just said, please.
I definitely appreciate what the attorney indicated. A part of a unified development ordinance is it's a collection of different regulations that work succinctly together. And as such, the design requirements of section 5.3.1 subsection F2, which specifically indicates for customer entrances, indicates such that a customer entrance is essentially a primary or a secondary entrance. It notes building entrances shall be designed as primary or second entrance by the applicant, but each principal building shall have at least one primary entrance. As this is the primary customer entrance, is by default, per this definition in our UDO, a secondary or a primary facade.
Thank you.
Questions, comments from board? Commissioner Miles?
I just want to follow up where my previous question, ensuring that the protection of the grade site back there, that is being considered, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's still that 45-foot type D buffer alongside.
Thank you.
And just to respond very briefly to Mr. Clark, I appreciate there's different sections. Both of those sections make reference to primary and secondary. There is a distinction, though, between primary and secondary building walls, which is the standard that has been discussed up to this point, the standard that's applicable to the design requirements, and that is not addressed by the customer entrances portion of it. So we think our point still stands. This is a tertiary building wall and should be treated as such.
Any other questions from the board? Comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, James. James, anybody else at this time to speak for the applicant?
James.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't understand.
Anybody else to speak for your group at the time?
None unless there's additional questions.
Okay, sure. Is there anybody else present wishing to speak on this application this evening? For or against? Any other additional comment? All right. I think with that, we can proceed to the next agenda item, which is deliberations. We'll proceed in the manner we did last time, which is to leave the hearing open so that there's the ability to take additional testimony if the board so decides in the decision it makes.
What are the four options? So we're going to deliberate now, going to decide to whether approve or disapprove? Or
Correct. Yeah, Mike, if you'll show me just a couple. Let's look one more time at the options for what they can do, and I'll talk about those, and then the standards next.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you going to close the public hearing before you start deliberations?
I had not planned on it, but we can do that and reopen it if we like.
Just asking so that I understand to make sure I know that this is still part of the public hearing. These deliberations are part of the public hearing.
Yes.
All right.
So that additional testimony can be taken if the board desires. And before we take a motion, thank you, it's a good point. Before we take a motion, let's revisit that because we'll kind of proceed in the manner we did last time where it might make sense to leave it open if the board so decides. So these are the options that we can discuss, and I'm happy to take questions as you're going through it to consider how to proceed here. But I know in discussions with James last time and previously kind of how we got to this evening, if the board needs more information, if the board needs anything from the applicant, and I note James's comment, that they don't want, they made their arguments, but I think the point he made was there may be additional options in certain circumstances, and so I think in that scenario, if that's the way the board is leaning, then you will have the opportunity to hear additional options. So with that, let's look at the 6 requirements, and that's what the board will discuss. And as we've done with other permits, members of the board, or permit applications, I'd ask you to talk about each one at a time, just to develop the board's discussion and a consensus or lack of consensus as to whether these are met or not met before any motion is heard. Any questions for me right now? Okay, thanks. Why don't you all start with number 1 and discuss the testimony on that point.
Commissioner Laux?
I don't see any problem with public health or safety in the location proposed.
Commissioner Harrison?
Neither do I. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
I see nothing wrong with that.
Commissioner Miles?
I see no issues.
Commissioner Baxter?
I see no issues with standard 1.
Thank you. Standard 2? Commissioner Baxter?
Here's where things get tricky, because the town is saying that they don't meet the UDO, and of course the applicant is saying that they do. And I would like to see something done to address this, because I also feel like it kind of doesn't meet the UDO as presented at this time.
Commissioner Miles?
I'd just like to, I'm kind of with that, just if the applicant is willing to address those awnings. I don't know if this is the proper time to ask that, or whatever that town is recommending, if they're willing to address that issue with conditions, Sam.
Well, let's continue the discussion. I hear your point. We'll continue the discussion. I'll add that the board can issue conditions on the permit consistent with the provisions of the UDO in the board's determination. So it's different from a conditional rezoning where there needs to be agreement. The board has the opportunity in this scenario to issue conditions, but that doesn't mean that you have to do that. And certainly if you want to consider input from the people that build this product and do it, and that's okay too.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
There's just a little fine line there that we're talking with, and I think it's fine. I think, we may be carrying it a little, because as I know the area, and I think you would not see it. Problem with number 3 either.
Commissioner Harrison?
I am going to err on the side of our staff, and I would like to have this standard number 2 looked at a little further in what our staff is saying in regards to bringing it up to that standard of the UDO.
Commissioner Laux?
Once again, the reason these get to us is they're not cut and dried. If you look on page 22 of the PowerPoint presentation, it looks like about 2/3 of the land abutting that property is suburban residential with nothing on there right now. So just thinking ahead, if someone were to develop that as residential, additional screening could be done if it's an issue, and or if that got rezoned as commercial, it's probably not even an issue at that point in time.
So you stand where?
Just some food for thought.
Okay, thanks everyone. That was number 2. Let's continue the discussion on number 3, Mayor.
Commissioner Laux?
I don't see it substantially injuring the value of the abutting land.
Commissioner Harrison?
I agree.
Commissioner Clark?
I agree.
Commissioner Miles?
I don't see any injury at all to the value of budding property.
Commissioner Baxter?
I don't believe it's going to substantially injure the value.
Thank you.
Okay, number 4, Mayor, harmony with the area.
Commissioner Baxter?
I don't think it will not be in harmony. So do I think it will be in harmony? But I don't think it won't be in harmony, if that makes any sense, which maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
Commissioner Miles?
I think it'll be in harmony with all the new communities that we have going up over there, opportunity to store things. I think it'll work in that area.
Commissioner Clark?
I think we'll be in harmony.
Commissioner Harrison?
I think it will be in harmony.
Commissioner Laux?
Harmony.
2 more, folks. Thank you for indulging me on this.
That's the best way to do it.
It's productive, I'm telling you. Number 5.
Commissioner Laux?
It appears it will be in general conformity. I agree.
Commissioner Harrison?
Well,
Commissioner Clark?
I agree.
Commissioner Miles? Commissioner Baxter?
I also agree.
And last one, Mayor, the concept plan.
Commissioner Baxter?
Yeah, they submitted a concept plan. Yes.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrison?
yes.
Commissioner Laux?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for not kicking me off the stage for making you do that, especially number 6. Okay, let's see. The hearing's open. If it's okay with James, I'd like to hear from James on what the applicant, if the applicant would like to submit additional evidence. James, the way I see it is you could offer to submit additional evidence. You could ask for more time to do that. You could stick with what you're proposing and allow the board to vote. I think you're clear, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. I think we appreciate the legitimate concern that the board has about making sure that the standards are met, and we share that. So what I would like to do, if it's okay with the board, I think where I'd like to see this go, if it's okay with commissioners, is to impose a condition on the approval for number 2, specific action items that the applicant can add to the concept plan. I'd prefer to leave here this evening with a concrete sense of what has to be done, just so everyone is on the same page about what needs to be met and what we have to do on our side, and then what needs to be accepted on the town side, and craft, essentially with Mr. Clark's input in front of this board, conditions that we can attach to that facade. And to do that, if it's all right, I'd like to bring Robert High Development up. Mr. High has a much better sense of what can and can't be done than I do. Sort of the concept for a condition, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
State your name, please.
Robert High, 813 LFU Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina.
Thank you.
I don't know how to get back to the picture, but if you can get back to the picture for me, I can see if we can talk to it.
Picture, sir?
The one with the garage doors. In this picture, you brought up that there were columns that run between the doors. We could put, so go back, well, on the front there or the bottom, you'll see we have a brick facade along the front of that building. I could make those columns right there in between each door, as I believe was somewhat suggested anyway, make those brick to match the front facade in a brick material that would be compatible. That would be something that could happen in a reasonable frame. The doors are a roll-up door, and they roll up in a barrel of about this size. So it is really hard for me to figure out how to get glass to roll up. I can't do it. So I think to try to suggest that making the doors glass would be really hard. Is there a reason to paint the doors to look like a glass? We could do that. I think the better idea is to continue to carry the facade that is facing both roads to those columns there. That would probably dress up that part of the building. There's really a minimum part above that door that has much room for an awning, and I don't know that you would be making a bigger joke out of the way the awning would look by it being so skimpy. If that in fact is something that you so desire, I'm gonna figure out something, but sometimes you got to be careful about wanting something that might look maybe not as good as it looks right now. So I think adding the brick, breaking up the facade there would probably add a lot of texture and hopefully get the same effect that you were asking for in kind of discussing the windows and stuff. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Miles?
I was just going to ask Mike his thoughts on that, that brick addition.
It's a step in the right direction. There's a couple components, however, that to worth noting. instead of having each door independently covered with an awning, have them, it appears here that these are almost configured in pairs currently, so the possibility of an awning covering multiple doors as opposed to single doors addresses that kind of breakup perspective. I agree with the architect in terms of continuing the facade treatments that are on the other sides around to this elevation as well, as opposed to the almost flat roof appearance that it has currently. And then putting the brick columns similar that are in here, along here, I think that steps in the right direction. In terms of the possibility of spandrel glass, and I apologize, I'm not an expert in that field, but I'm wondering if there is a metal panelized system that could have that same reflectivity as a spandrel glass that could be used.
Both, try to go to 2 or 3 things. I think you're misunderstanding the picture you're looking at here. These are not broken up in pairs. What you're seeing on if you're looking from the right to the left, you've got a column, and then you got another column that has somewhat of a green character coming down it. That's actually a downspout. So it is not where the doors are broken up together or paired together. Each one is individual, and that's a downspout coming off the building. So the brick would be behind that downspout to still be in harmony of your area. These doors are not a traditional garage door that comes up and slides back like that. These doors are made to roll. It is a heavier door, we more secure, etc., than what you would have on a typical garage door. And they're really, those type doors you're talking about are not made for this type of construction in general. This door is specialized for this product to fit and work within the building. So I think by trying to put the brick there, it would probably, I would hope, meet all your texture and everything you would want there. But I don't know, unless we were to talk about painting a door, we try to make a door do something that it's not going to normally do. It's probably not the most productive situation here.
Commissioner Baxter?
I have a couple of thoughts, and one is about trying to give the false appearance of glass, and I worry that there's going to be a rather swift deterioration of any kind of material that is used if we're attempting that type of product, just because having used a storage unit in the past, I know the mechanics of it, and I feel like making that requirement would just lead to things looking very, very shoddy very, very quickly. With the consideration of adding the brick elements, do these doors just come in standard green? Is there the possibility to powder coat them to a color that matches the facade more, or is in some way perhaps more acceptable to what the planning department is looking for?
I have not heard anything about color. If that is a situation we need to address, I'll be glad to discuss it. But I did not know that the green was an issue. And so if the green is an issue, I'll be glad to talk about it. And I can change the color. But you're going to have awnings. Let's go back to the front of that building. You're going to have awnings that have a color. We're trying to make things that have texture. and all too. And so you're going to have a coping on that building there that you see that will have a color on it. And so we're trying to add features. And if we want to make it bland on the back, I can pick a color to make that door bland.
It's not so much any particular color. It's trying, in my opinion, the effort would be to make it look a little bit less garishly like they are roll-up doors.
I would be glad to try to pick another color. Again, I think when you see the total product with the awnings, the coping, and other things, and when you look at many buildings, you'll find that the colors match different parts of the building. But to me, I can pick a color.
In here, we can't go off of any other evidence than what's been presented, so we can't even
I'd be
consider.
glad to change those doors to white.
What are your thoughts as far as changing the colors of the doors and adding the brick features? Would that bring them closer to compliance? And if so, how much more effort would it take for them to reach compliance? And a third or another, I don't even know what number question I'm on at this point. As far as the consideration of color scheming of garage doors, is this something that you would need us to table and for you to gather information? And okay.
I would say, in general, we build these projects all over Southeast United States. And I sit up here a whole lot and answer questions. A lot of times I'm asking for more texture, more color, or other things that it does not look as blah. One of the things we have done is, if you went back, we originally had a driveway exiting Proctor. We closed that driveway up completely. We've put a buffer, a fence, and a setback in there and implemented that. But originally, and that was working with staff. Originally, we had a driveway coming out there. So we thought we had listened to the concerns of staff and completely enclosed that, put a type D buffer, put a fence, and yes, will you ever be able to see that project, that door? You might. I cannot tell you whether we're going to have a hurricane and the trees and the bushes get blown over, but you set up a type D buffer in your ordinance for a reason, to block visibility. We have provided a type D buffer and a fence to help block this. We have closed off a road on a second driveway to help improve any situation that we felt like could occur from that side. So if changing the color of these doors is what helps us, we will be glad to do that.
I don't know that it will. I was just putting thoughts out there.
I like the idea of the brick on the column, and following up with what Commissioner Baxter said, if these doors, say each pair of two would be a different color that repeats itself, it actually would look like individual businesses, or they would be different as opposed to a row of garage doors. You know, even following something as simple as the tan and brown up there would give the appearance of maybe 4 or 5 different businesses to the casual observer driving by. Because like I said, I don't think you're going to be able to see a lot of this anyhow, and I'm not gung-ho on little mini awnings, something that, you know, is maybe 6 inches tall and sticks out 2 or 3 feet, I think is going to really look cheesy.
I also think that as far as the operations of the facility goes, those awnings would be damaged just by people trying to move their items in and out. And so that might not be the best option, but I want to see what can happen to bring this project into as close to compliance, if not compliance.
Commissioner Miles?
To the applicants, kind of get an understanding, make sure that you are willing to change those colors if that is necessary, and then basically just a brick behind the downspouts. That's what we're looking to do to bring into compliance. Mike?
Not only the brick behind the downspout, but the brick on every column between each one of those doors. Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to make sure I cleared that up because there's downspouts every other column. And I didn't want you to think that I was just going to put them behind the downspouts.
For me, I just feel comfortable with it. He's doing the brick, and then the type D buffer. It sounds as if we should be where we need to be. That's just my where I'm at right now. I mean, we can continue to nitpick and kind of say iron here, brick here. This gentleman seems to be willing to kind of make such assessments on the spot. So if he, with those conditions, I think we can move forward. For me.
Ask a question for clarification, just
Please.
for understanding. Does that include the type D buffer along Proctor Street? Because that was not as proposed in the current site plan.
Could you go back to that for just a minute, the overall larger picture of the, yeah, there we go. And so there are, that's a type C buffer that's along Proctor, but there is an opaque fence behind the type C buffer.
For this portion here, it doesn't.
So right where your pointer is, that's the sight line that is potentially available?
Potentially, it's not spelled out specifically.
Commissioner Baxter, part of the challenge with the type D buffer, it has a minimum width of 40 feet. So we pretty quickly have a space issue there. At the same time, the fence and the plantings were designed to achieve, I think, the objective of type D, which is to prevent views. So that opaque fence that is behind the type C, the 20-foot type C, hopefully achieves the same result given the limited space that's available along that frontage.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Laux?
No.
Commissioner Harrison?
No.
Commissioner Clark?
No.
Commissioner Miles?
No further questions.
Commissioner Baxter?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think we can close the public hearing, and the board can entertain a motion after that discussion. Let me ask one thing first. Anybody in the room wishing to offer any additional testimony before we close the public hearing?
Close the public hearing and
Mike, will you bring it to the options screen? And I'll jump in a little bit to try to guide the board here. So you discussed some conditions on number 2. So if someone does make a motion along those lines, just you'd make a motion that the evidence meets the findings with the conditions that you choose to put on the approval.
do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditions and establish findings of facts as the ones that we mentioned, as far as the brick and as far as the coloring of the doors.
So to be clear, your motion is to approve with conditions of brick on the dividers like we discussed and alternating colors used elsewhere in the building on every other set of double doors. Is that correct?
That, working along with staff to make sure that color suffices what we need, Mike.
Yeah. Okay.
I second that motion.
Discussion? Commissioner Laux?
In favor?
Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Clark?
Favor.
Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Commissioner Baxter?
Favor.
Motion passes. Thank you. Before we start the 401 West Gannon conditional zoning, we will have a 10-minute break, recess. Thank you.
Well. It's just me and my husband. People with kids are not going to.
That's why I asked.
Yep. Must be 50. Somebody put it on there.
That's Andy's sister. Can't you tell she looks like Miss
Got townhouses right next door, so.
From the dry cleaners.
Yeah, I've never really seen her interact with her much.
Well, that's yours, so. So, I'm going for it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, I'm getting you your name back.
Yeah. Whatever you hand out, I'm going to need a set. So we need an extra set.
There's yeah, there's plenty.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
So
You're a
there's
student
one
of the game of basketball.
package.
I consider myself a very discriminating viewer.
Yeah. Do you have a preference for the women's game or the men's game?
Oh, that's a really good question. I prefer the men's game.
Do you?
Yeah, I've watched enough of women's games. And my daughter Kelly played all 4 years in high school and all 4 years at state. I've seen all of them.
Yeah.
But I do prefer the men's game. I'm not real sure how it's evolving right now.
The women's game?
No, the men's game.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure how it's evolving. It's changed so much. Yeah, I mean, I know.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah. Mike might need you for something, I don't know.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we don't need to start reviewing the card types.
It's always like the fundamentals because they couldn't. They had to do the fundamentals or rely on the fundamentals more because of the athleticism. The athleticism is like,
It's interesting because I don't think of it in terms of diversity.
That Citizen Straight yesterday?
Yes, sir, I did. Just trying to work out to kind of like figure out the best way to get involved in the community. I advocate a big for like the little club. Sometimes I'm like, those guys are doing the
Because you had water before you got
get
here.
everyone to start. They're going to guide you to meet the right people. Let's have a good meal.
Gosh, I'm going to fall asleep. I worked hard today. I had to work. I got the statements and all that stuff.
So much of it is
Beam?
drive, penetrate, create your shot.
Mike Clark?
Mayor, once again, members of the board, this is a completion of the zoning request for 401 West Gannon. As you recall, this is a conditional zoning request. With conditional zoning requests, as you recall, they do need to meet the standards of section 2.2.6K, which include that it's applicable or it meets the applicable health, safety, welfare, appropriate for the location in which it's going to be placed, reasonable and in the public interest, that provides a concept plan with applicable regulations, and then relevant factors as deemed relevant by the board. To bring you back up to speed, the applicant is proposing what for the use classification is a multifamily residential development that would be containing 3 structures, and these structures would contain independent dwelling units that would have the appearance of townhomes. But from a constructability point and from a use point, it'd be classified as multifamily residential. It is a conditional zoning request because right now the property is zoned office and institutional, and the applicant is proposing to rezone it to downtown periphery conditional. As I know, it is multifamily, and it would contain a total of 11 dwelling units. The property in question is located at the corner of 97, also known as West Gannon and Rotary Drive. It does have adjacent residential homes. The property owner and the applicant are the same entity, Meridian Properties, and the site is currently vacant. The current zoning is office and institutional, but they're proposing downtown periphery conditional. Once again, for the public hearing that was held last month, we did provide all the applicable public hearing notification requirements, as well as the best practices, including posting on the town's website and sending out to our email notification list. To provide a bit greater concept, the property in question is located here at the corner of Gannon and Rotary. This is the Wedgwood Shopping Center. And the former Compare Foods is located there, and then our downtown is located there. The parcel as in question, as well as the adjacent parcel, is zoned office and institutional. It is not currently zoned to accommodate single-family residential uses, as much as office, professional services, those type of uses, as well as some higher density residential uses. The future land use classification, it does call for this to be general commercial, along with the other parcels on Gannon, on the south side of Gannon, that have the frontage there. The concept plan does call for multifamily dwelling units broken into 3 structures, which would contain 11 dwelling units. As I noted, they are townhome-style structures, and they were modified from the original application, and there's a third rendering that was proposed tonight, and we'll go through that. There's a 30-foot type C buffer on the adjacent residential sides, and the applicant has indicated that they're willing to put in a fence on the south side adjacent to an adjacent residential. They're providing an open space preservation area in 2 locations. These were the revised structures that the applicant proposed at the joint public hearing, and then also provided updated renderings based on comments that were provided last at the joint public hearing for consideration tonight. The applicant does have a presentation that they'll go through to provide further clarification and details pertaining to these elevations. So the proposed conditions that were part of the original application were applicable to section 5.3.3 E4C, which pertain to the garage widths. Everything that has frontage on a street in terms of the dwelling units would be alley loaded or will be loaded in the back of the structures. They're through a shared driveway. Some slight deviations from section 5.3.3 section 4E, architectural conditions. Section 533E6C, building articulation. And then section 3.5.4E14 and 5.3.3E8A to allow for the 3-story multifamily residential structure adjacent to single-family detached residential uses. Couple considerations. This is a new product type. Even with the revised elevations, it's a 3-story townhome. These are not structures that we typically have elsewhere within the town of Zebulon. However, they're a characteristic of new development being built in all of the other municipalities within the Triangle area. As an example, the revised elevations are similar to these, which are located over in Wendell. It does create increased density. With increased density allows for options such as eventually for public transportation. Increased density also helps commercial operations in nearby. But increased density needs to be done in the appropriate locations. If this was at the outer fringes of our developed area, a higher density would not be appropriate. But given the context of the adjacent to non-residential uses and activities, higher density would be appropriate in this particular location. They're proposing pedestrian-oriented design. Specifically, the buildings will be fronted directly onto the sidewalk with the exception of a couple structures into the back area. So the primary element that you see is the building and the front door as opposed to the garage or the driveway. Open space preservation, there was quite a bit of discussion last time about this tree. The applicant has provided some additional elevation or some additional details that they're going to go through here tonight. And finally, location. As I noted, this is an 11-minute walk from these proposed locations into the downtown, and thinking in concept of the Candy Cane Lane option. These are the types of residents that would have the opportunity to walk there as opposed to drive into downtown and seek parking. Furthermore, the location with the increased density in nearby proximity to the Wedgwood Shopping Center would help spur potential redevelopment in the future. With that increased density creates increased demand, especially when you get into these higher or now market rate price points. They're higher than what we've seen elsewhere in Zebulon, but characteristic of what we're now starting to see on this side of Wake County. Those increased price points are going to result in increased demand for commercial services, which then helps to amplify the potential redevelopment of adjacent commercial areas, such as the Wedgwood Shopping Center. The other consideration is the current zoning that's right there. The applicant is proposing something like this, and as I noted, they provided some additional renovation or elevations tonight. It is a residential product. It's a multifamily residential product, but it's constructed to look like a single-family attached product. The current zoning, however, would allow something like this. Something like this could actually be built on the site adjacent to these residential homes and not have to come before the Board of Commissioners for a rezoning. The property is currently zoned office and institutional. So a 3-story commercial structure would be able to go there by right. It would just require going through the technical review committee and meeting the applicable conditions of the UDO. One of these will get built at some point on the site. The question is it going to be a residential use or is it going to be an office and institutional use that would be constructed in something similar to this? So once again, the standards for consideration is does it meet the health, safety, and welfare? Is the multifamily dwelling or the multifamily dwelling appearing to look like a single family appropriate for this location? Is it reasonable and in the public interest? Is the concept plans consistent with the applicable regulations of the Unified Development Ordinance and other factors as relevant to the board? Staff can't speak for number 5, but based on what the applicant has provided, as well as the additional renderings, staff does believe that the standards 1 through 4 are met. The planning board took this up for a review and unanimously recommended approval as amended. Those amendments noted that it was consistent with goal 1 as well as policies E, J, and K of the housing and neighborhood section of the comprehensive land use plan and the standards in section 2.2.6K of the UDO. The additional elements for consideration from the planning board included a fence on the adjacent property the adjacent residential property where the property owner had concerns to the south, construction of a 3-foot tall fence or 3-foot tall wall along the sidewalk between the front of the structures and the sidewalk with openings for the individual tenant spaces to go in. The revised elevations that had the pitched roofs, the more traditional, also taking into consideration other color options available. Staff does recommend approval of the request with those amendments, noting that it is consistent with Goal 1 of the housing and neighborhood section of the comprehensive plan, as well as policies E, J, and K, and then the standards found in section 2.2.6K of the UDO. And I'm available if you have any questions, and the staff does have a sample motion available. Furthermore, the applicant does have a presentation regarding some possible modifications and further amendments to be proposed tonight.
Questions from the board? Commissioner Miles?
I just have a quick question. I was on the planning board meeting that night. I don't recall them doing a unanimously voting in favor. How can I verify that?
Can we get clarification on that?
We would have to take a recess so I could go check on it.
I would like that, please.
Yeah, I may have written it down wrong. I apologize if I did.
How long would it be?
5 minutes, maybe 10. Give me 10 minutes to be safe.
It's important to me, sir.
Okay. 10-minute recess.
Education is lifelong. Never stop.
Reconvene.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the exact reason we have somebody else take minutes. The vote was 4-2 to recommend approval with those conditions, not unanimous. But the planning board did recommend approval of the proposed request with those conditions.
Any other questions, comments?
I don't know how I feel about a 3-foot wall. I think it'll make it look more like a fortress than some kind of protection area. And do we have a sample of what units 9, 10, and 11 will look like from each view?
The applicant may, here, let me switch over to the applicant's presentation.
Just state your name, yeah.
Hi, Sherry Case with Meridian Properties Group, 4030 Wake Forest Road in Raleigh. So to answer your question, Commissioner Baxter, I don't have the 3 in the back specifically to show you. We have our previous layout, so you can see at the top of the presentation here, you can see what it will look like with the, I guess that's actually, no, that's the rear entry, I believe. No, that's the front entry. That's the front entry on the other side with the other building. So we don't really have exactly what the new one will look like with the new changes that we made based on the board's comments from last time. It's just a lot for an architect to slot in with a holiday and everything like that. So we were able to just get the main buildings of what with the rear entry ones facing Gannon and Rotary will look like. But you can get a sense of what they will look like from that.
Commissioner Miles?
I had concerns about the parking and storage. Were there any issues, kind of anything that was touched base to try to address that issue at all as far as parking and storage for those units there?
For parking, I mean, as we've mentioned, you'll have 2 spots per home. One in the driveway, one in the garage, and there will be some parking in a mailbox kiosk area, but there's no additional parking, spots that we've made or anything like that.
So if you could help me understand, then, okay, 2 spots, house guests, somebody has a party, holiday season comes up. What are these people supposed to do as we as commissioners taking this in consideration? What am I to think? Where are these people to park without parking along the street? Now we're coming to an issue with bringing in ZPD, whatever it may be. How can I address this if you could help me understand a little bit the concern, addressing that concern for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, we are complying with what is required for parking spaces. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
There is some space. I understand that, we've discussed Rotary Drive before with the width of that road. There may be some parking that could be accommodated. There are no parking signs in front on that street. So there may be some, side parking there on that road, on that street itself, that could accommodate that, especially, let's say, in the evening or something like that when there's no utility pickups or anything like that happening, but that could be an option.
With that said, my only concern with that is it potentially could be an answer, but the people that live on that street, Rotary Drive, they are 2 of the 6 people that was opposing this the property being developed this way. So that would bring it where eventually they're going to have that concern where they're going to bring in no parking. And there again, it goes back to that Rotary Club. I think that would become the parking lot for this community. And we have a Rotary Club that is very user-friendly right now, but future, I look towards, like I said, that smart growth. I don't know if they're going to want to utilize that as their parking, as the kind of like community parking for your development.
I mean, I will say that DTP zoning, which is what we're trying to achieve, does not have any guest parking requirements at all. So we are providing 2 spots per home, which is actually greater than what is required in the current O&I zoning, which is 1.75 spots per home. So we're actually going above and beyond what is actually required with this rezoning. So, I mean, we're offering 2 spots versus O&I is 1.75. So I hear what you're saying, but we're actually exceeding what's even required. There's no guest parking requirements at all in DTP.
Thank you.
I'd like to just go through the presentation. Maybe some of that would be answered. I'm sorry, Commissioner Baxter, if you had a question, I'm happy to answer it first.
That's okay.
Commissioner
It
Harrison.
will probably be answered with the presentation, so.
Okay. So I just wanted to, just for a couple minutes, I just wanted to go back and look at the different iterations of how we've tried to, with working with staff, working with the board, hearing the comments from the planning board at the last meeting, how this is sort of played out in our meetings and made changes to our project as we've heard your comments. So this was the initial rendering, which we've changed. These are the rear and side elevations of that modern to a more traditional. And then after at the last meeting we spoke, we found that you guys were looking for something that was a little more in the original color palette so that each individual unit looked like its own home. We also added more stone. We went with the stone versus the brick, which seemed to be the consensus for everybody. And then we also have tried to add some more aesthetically pleasing views of these end units, which will be more prominent when you're driving down Gannon. So we've demonstrated some landscaping, the stone, some bump outs, just trying to make this more aesthetically pleasing. I know that was a big point last time we spoke, so we hope that this is more in line with what you're looking for. We also, one of the things that was brought up was trying to propose exactly what the amenity area, quote unquote amenity area, the open space in that top corner. So obviously keeping the tree. We haven't been able to get it all the way rendered out, but we're hoping that this would really demonstrate what it is that we would desire to do, having a pergola with seating underneath, having a sort of meandering path, a natural path that goes underneath that pergola that connects to that greenway, which would be a 10-foot wide greenway along Gannon, along our property frontage. It was brought up about, there was a half wall sort of mentioned, or fencing. We also felt that the fencing would be better than a wall itself. So as you can see in the top corner there, we would propose doing a black metal fence with stone columns that would match the exterior stone on the elevations. And those would be arranged around a gate and at the corners and things like that. It's not our intent, so the X marks along the green space are where we would intend to put that fencing. It is not something that we are planning to continue in front of all of the homes. We just felt like aesthetically that would be very like cutting it off in front of each house. So the primary concern that we heard was that being a corner primarily where people would spend time or kids would play, to have that barrier to the road. And so we took that to heart and tried to combine some stone aesthetics from the exteriors and put those into the columns with the black metal gate. One thing that we wanted to touch on was the advantages of why we're wanting to rezone for this project from O&I to DTP. We touched on it before, where the parking spots that are required are 1.75 per home with no garage. That would just be surface level parking. And with DTP, we would secure 2 spots per home, and one of them would be a garage. Architectural requirements are more typical of office or commercial under the current O&I zoning, whereas there would be more stringent and residential-looking architectural requirements under our DTP. So we feel like it would fit more in line with the residential area that's surrounding it. The greenway extension under O&I is not necessarily required. That was something that was brought up by the Parks and Rec Department, and under DTP, we are going to go ahead and do that greenway extension. That's a 10-foot wide greenway along Gannon. The pedestrian access, where you have your homes along Rotary and Gannon, you would have rear entry where your front door would come out directly onto those sidewalks. That wouldn't be required under O&I. That's not something that we would have to do. And so we feel like under DTP, that would be a much more attractive and convenient pedestrian access, which is more consistent with what the town of Zebulon is looking to do as part of your growth pattern. The O&I zoning by right, within the zoning, we would just work with staff and we would follow the UDO and it would just be reviewed by staff level. But under DTP, the board and residents are having input onto what the exteriors would look like in the site aesthetic. We had some people at the public hearing last month say that they felt more comfortable with a fence along their property line. And so those comments are allowed to be heard and taken into account as part of our design with doing this DTP rezoning. Another thing that I just wanted to mention as well, it's not necessarily an advantage, but we are not increasing our density here. So under O&I and DTP, under this multifamily designation, we are not adding to our density. We are allowed 12 units per acre under O&I or DTP. So we are not trying to add any more units under this rezoning that we couldn't already have by right under our O&I. This next slide is under O&I, we fully vetted the option of just doing 11 units with the 1.75 parking, and this is what it looked like. It was 2-story units surrounding a parking lot with all surface level parking, and it's not something that we felt was attractive as an option of what we could do with this rezoning. And so we feel like we're providing a much more attractive home and community with our presentation in this rezoning than what could be done, as an example, by right, by doing these multifamily townhomes, by surrounding 11 units around a parking lot with surface level. These next 2 slides are from the UDO, Town of Zebulon UDO. It's a principal use table. So all of the lines that are highlighted here, blocked out with the red box, these are everything that's allowed by right, permitted right in O&I that we could do. So some, I know that's kind of small, but some of the things that are on here are live-work dwelling, daycare centers, alcohol treatment facilities, urgent cares, office and professional buildings, restaurants with drive-through service. And so Mr. Clark showed a photo in his presentation of a 3-story building with glass and concrete that could be, these homes could look more like just what would look like an apartment building rather than a well thought out home that would mesh more into this community and this area with single family residences. And so that's just sort of what I wanted to go through. I mean, this table kind of demonstrates unfortunately, if we are not approved tonight or be able to come to some sort of consensus, we have to go back to this table and we have to choose from these things and decide what we want to do with this project. And so we're hoping that we can move forward with, working together on what we've presented and find, some common ground. I feel like we've tried to listen to the board and the planning board and staff on what is wanted in this area. And I think, all of these renderings show that we've gone through 3 different iterations of renderings. We've really tried to hear what you guys have said and make changes. And we're hoping we can finish that up today, hopefully. Any questions from
Questions from the board? Mr. Baxter?
Is each unit going to have a balcony? It looks like on the end units there is one, but I can't tell if...
They will have, yes, it'll be some sort of balcony. It will be approximately something the size of maybe a bistro table and 2 chairs or something. There will be a balcony, yes, on all the units, not just the end units. It is pictured here because you can see the end unit, but they will all have one, yes.
Commissioner Miles?
I just asked my fellow commissioners, we're being asked to rezone something that we have yet to see the complete plans of. We're hearing that do the holidays or do the, I would love to see the complete plans sitting in front of us so we can see complete what that view from 9, 10, and 11 would look like. In this small area, this is a very small area. We're asking 11 units in this small area. I personally would like to see the entire layout in front of us where we're not left with any guesses of what it's going to look like, what this will be, before we make a decision on this. It's just, I think it's just important. I have the concerns about the parking and spacing. I mean, storage actually. It's just really, I want to see all the plans in front of me before we make a sound decision. I understand that it sounds as if somewhat to me like a threat that they can put whatever there. We have policies in place for that. I just want to make sure we see what we're getting before we vote on what we're making a decision upon.
When you say you want to see a full plan, you're saying that you want to see units 9 through 11 with the front entry?
Correct.
Even though those are facing just the interior driveway and it's literally this look with just a garage instead of where those 2 windows are?
As I stated, I would like to see complete forms in front of me before I make a decision. And I asked my other commissioners to take consideration. We had 6 citizens before us that said they didn't want it. So I think it's our due diligence to make sure we give the citizens, those 6 that came before us, to give them the kind of like make sure we looked at everything there was, all options before us. And we have yet to have one in favor. We had 6 opposed. So, I mean, that's where I sit on it.
May I ask if, barring the 3 flags in the back, does this seem to align with what the board's comments were with adding a more traditional look, the coloring, the side views, and things like that? Is that, if you're just saying the ones that are facing Rotary and Gannon, do these align with what it is that you were looking for?
I like this color scheme that you've presented so much more. I think that it makes a difference in what the product looks like. But I do have to agree with Commissioner Miles. I want to be able to see every aspect of what this development is going to look like. In addition, we had some discussion last month, well, we actually had quite a bit about storage space. And I think there was some, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a request about attic storage and what that might look like since the roofs are going to be peaked.
Okay. I don't recall, and I could be incorrect, I don't recall attic storage space being defined previously. There usually is some unfinished space in an attic. I specifically, though, I don't have any sort of dimensions or what that would be for these units. But, I mean, that's usually not fleshed out at this stage, though. I mean, usually that's fleshed out further down the line at a building permit situation. I mean, I'm not really sure what to say. There is storage in these homes. I mean, you have a garage, and there's internal storage within the home as well. We're definitely willing to try and see if we could talk with the builder and add attic space specifically. But, I mean, beyond being able to show you that, I can't show you that today, but I mean, it's something that we're willing to talk about, though.
Clark?
Envision, from what you've given us, I think it looks very nice. I think it's good use of space. I know people say that they're concerned about the parking. I think that will work out. that Rotary Drive may be able to have parking marked on one side because it is a wider street. Storage space, I think we too need to think about the type of person that will be buying a home like this. It will probably be single or a young couple. I don't think you're going to have anybody with a bunch of children wanting something like this. So I think we're meeting the need of a different demographics, and I like them. So.
Commissioner Harrison? Commissioner Laux?
Yeah, I've liked each iteration has become more historical looking with the window panes, et cetera. My only comment would be the pedestrian area there in the corner. There is a beautiful stone fence across the street that, to keep in the harmony of the neighborhood, would be like if you could pick up some of that appearance of the low-level stone fences directly across the street.
Does it have metal fencing above it, or is it all
Black
stone?
metal fencing around the balconies on either end of the home, but there's a stone veneer like wall across the very front of the building. It would be nice if you could somehow tie in to look like that. It would make both sides of the street actually match.
Across the front of the property frontage or across the front of the building itself?
Across actually the home is set up on an earthen platform, and there's a little wall in front of it, probably, I guess, 4 feet tall. But you can drive by and see it. If you could pick up that appearance with your corner there, it would just tie the whole street together.
Okay.
Podium, please, if he's going to speak.
No, he's not. Sorry.
Okay.
Commissioner Baxter?
Yes, sir.
Comments, questions?
I think that I've asked my questions.
Commissioner Miles?
I'd like to pose a question. It's kind of to just get a better understanding. Commissioner Clark said the parking will work itself out so that I can have a kind of like a good sound judgment on if we do vote upon this tonight. Can you help me understand what do you see it working itself out? And what do you see?
I don't think you're going to have that many cars. I think people that purchase these homes are going to be ones that have 2 cars, or I just think I think some of us look at it as, well, I need more storage, or I need more car space, or I may have company. We are not the people that are moving in here, so we've got to think about that too. You know, your demographics is just.
So my question to the 6 citizens that came in and said no, the rationale to them is what? That we move forward and this developer's coming in. We have 6 citizens that said no, not one that said yes. So the rationale to those 6 is say, we hear you talking, you came to this meeting and told us your thoughts, but now we're going to decide to move forward in a different way. What am I as a commissioner to tell those 6? Please help me understand.
You can tell the people that come, you want to do what's best for Zebulon, and you want to do what's best for the citizens. Sometimes, however, with the growth of the town and the changes that are being made, all these things will not happen. And some will get mad, and some will hate you, but, you know, you take that when you take this job. But I do think you just need to think of Zebulon. Will this be good for Zebulon? It's your decision.
So the 6 citizens that came forward, they're not Zebulon? Is that what I'm to take?
They are Zebulon, but there's 6 people. Yes, and they live around there, but it may turn out, you know, you don't know, and you cannot, you can't make that decision. If you can't make that decision, you know, do it.
At this time, I will poll the board on the standards. The health, safety, and welfare. Commissioner Baxter.
I'm sorry.
Do you think this meets the standards? health, safety, and welfare, this project. Commissioner Miles.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yes.
Commissioner Laux. And number two, is it appropriate for the location? Commissioner Laux.
Yes, there's already residential apartments directly across the street from it, so it's in harmony with the location.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yes, I do think they meet standard number 2.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Miles.
No.
Commissioner Baxter.
Possibly.
Number three, reasonable in the public interest. Commissioner Baxter.
I think that we have a lot of this product coming in already, so I'm not sure if it's really in the public interest that we have more.
Commissioner Miles.
Taking consideration the 6 citizens that came before us and those that I've spoken with in the area, I say no.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yes.
Commissioner Laux.
Yes.
Number four, concept plans consistent with the regulations. Commissioner Laux.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Miles.
No.
Commissioner Baxter.
I would really like to see the full concept plan, all of the details as opposed to just the details of the buildings that are facing the street.
Any other relevant factors? Commissioner Miles.
Somewhat on hypotheticals. We have yet to see Meridian produce anything. So what we're doing, we're voting on something based on hypothetical that they're going to produce a product that's coming into our town. We're now in a position of growth where we can require the developers coming in to be held to certain standards. So present this full fact is there's nowhere else I would go and pretty much ask somebody to change the rules and regulations on hypotheticals. We have yet to see the full plan before us. We've heard from, we couldn't get to the architect to do this plan or whatever. Give it to us. When everybody else comes before us, we just finished up our hearing. They had all their plans before us. We're taking the word of someone else. Give us the facts. Give me the facts and let me make my decision based off the facts. That's what I'm asking.
This property is probably far better used for residential living than it is commercial. It is kind of a gateway into town, and it would be in harmony with the rest of the area.
Commissioner Harrison.
I don't have other relevant factors.
Commissioner Clark.
I'm ready to make the motion.
Commissioner Baxter.
I make a,
No, we're not ready for the motion yet. Okay. Commissioner Baxter.
I don't have any further, are you talking about number 5?
Yeah, right, number 5.
Relevant factors. I can think of right now, unless, we want to ask to have them come back before us with that additional information.
Thank you. So I guess you need to show us our options, Mike.
Yeah, the options before the board, we don't have a full slide for that, but would be to approve the request with conditions. Unlike a special use permit, those conditions do need to be agreed upon by the applicant. Approve as presented, and the applicant has indicated some modifications presented tonight. Deny the request, noting that it does not meet the applicable applicable standards, or to table the request subject to additional information they'd be seeking. And we request that you be very specific with that information that you're seeking. And the staff does have a motion available if you choose to move forward with the request tonight.
I'd like to make a motion. I hereby move to approve ordinance 2023-19 for CZ 2023-01 as amended with revised elevations, low wall along front property line and fence along south property line, finding that the request is consistent with Goal 1 and policies E, J, and K of the Housing and Neighborhood section of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan and the standards in Section 2226K of the UDO.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion.
I think it's just important right now that we see full plans of what's going to be there. I understand the residential, I understand that, but anything, we're setting the standards now. And everybody else that comes forward that gives us partial plans, we're going to make decisions based on partial plans. I don't know anywhere else you can go that you can get a board to decide off something that's not fully before them. I don't feel like that we're doing the citizens of Zebulon do just what they're due. We literally have yet to see the full concept of these plans. I understand the residential aspect, the scare tactics of what could be there from, I saw highlighted a psychiatric ward to whatever it may be. I understand that. But right now, we're in a position where we can set policy in place for the betterment of the citizens of Zebulon. Show me the full plans. We make a decision based off that. Give us the facts. That's all we're asking for, the facts. But we're about to make a decision off something that we don't have the full laid out before us what's going to be there completely. We're going off hypotheticals. What if they change their mind? They can tell us what they want to hear. But later on, once we rezone it and give it approval, we have no say in the matter. That's what we heard so far about the citizen from the development that we're dealing with Barrington. We're dealing with Tarrant Lake. We have developers make these promises before it's to get it approved, and then they change. So what's holding these guys accountable? Nothing.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second.
My only other comment is, are there any conditions you want to put on the motion for a final drawing or a plat to be brought back to review? We have a concept plan and a layout of the property.
We have the conditions listed that the planning board reviewed and went over thoroughly. So, I mean,
if you mention the planning board, we were also told that the planning board voted unanimously, which is not correct. They had issues. I was there for the meeting that night. So I just say we really take a step back. The land's not going anywhere. They already own the land. So give us full plans. What is the rush? We know they already have development that's going to be taking place in the future. I just know that they're going to be doing business here. We set the standards now to make sure the citizens of Zebulon get what's best for them. The developers, they're not going anywhere. We understand that concept. We're the second fastest growing municipality in North Carolina. They're coming to us. So we set the standards now so that future developers come in, and we set the standards what we want the best for Zebulon altogether. Not partial plans, not what ifs, not this or that. We give the specifics.
We have
Mayor,
a motion.
If I may ask clarification, the sample motion includes the low wall that was carryover from one of the conditions that were put forth by the planning board. Can we get clarification on the applicant's willingness to construct that or a potential modification for the motion if something different is to be considered?
Like the fence that they provided the picture of?
So we just want to clarify that we don't want to do the low wall in front of the units or fencing in front of the units that are facing Rotary or Gannon. We don't want to do fencing or a low wall there. We would like to propose the fence with the columns along the green space as proposed in the amenity photo. Or the low wall. We would be willing to do the low wall there as well. I think Commissioner Laux commented about the home that's across the street or diagonal that has the low wall with some metal fencing and things like that. We're fine with trying to do something consistent with that.
Commissioner Miles?
We're sitting here still asking questions now. If we had the plans of what the wall, we wouldn't be needing to ask what the 3-foot wall would be or what this, if we had all the plans before us. We're literally doing what I'm saying. We're asking questions that could be answered if we had all the plans before us. So, I mean, we're still asking questions. We've already had a motion to basically approve it, but yet we're still asking questions.
Just to clarify, I believe, during the planning board meeting, it was asked if we would consider and look into doing the fencing and the low wall. It wasn't a commitment at the time. It was, would you look into that? Because it was a proposition of, this is where this open space is, it's right on the corner, people are going to be spending time there could be kids, it's on the greenway path, would you consider doing that? We have considered it, and we are saying that we are fine with doing that low wall and fencing to match that property across the street. We're confirming that. The only thing that we wanted to clarify was that we do not want to put the low wall or the fencing in front of the properties that face Gannon or face Rotary. So we're confirming that there, which is in the motion. As far as the exteriors, I just want to again say, I hear what Commissioner Miles is saying, but we've provided the exteriors and what those would look like that are most prominently shown on the highly traveled roads of Gannon and Rotary to show what those streetscapes would look like. The 3 interior units are going to be consistent with the rest of the community. We wouldn't want them to stick out like sore thumbs from not being able to meld with the rest of the units. The only difference is they would, instead of those 2 windows that are in the front, you would have a garage there. So I see what you're saying, but we would be consistent with, we wouldn't have those 3 that are interior, only viewed from the interior of the community, only access from the interior of the community with that driveway. Those ones are the only ones that, they would have the garage on the front, and it would just be simply seeing a garage door there instead of 2 windows.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so it's time to call for a vote. A roll vote, starting with Commissioner Laux. In favor. Commissioner Harrison.
Favor.
Commissioner Clark.
In favor.
Commissioner Miles.
Yeah.
Commissioner Baxter.
Not without seeing the full plans, no.
Motion passes 3-2. Thank you. Board appointments.
The board has before them now is the planning board has 1 opening with 3 applications that were received. Each of the applicants were asked to attend to share their comments, and Mayor York, you're welcome to call them up to present and go from there.
Thank you. Ms. Carter? She's not here?
I'm assuming not, sir.
Okay. Because I think the last time we said we wanted folks to be present, right?
Correct.
Ms. Alexander?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to address everyone. I don't have planning experience as such, but I want to tell you just a little bit about myself and why I'm interested in becoming a member of the planning board. First of all, my name has already been mentioned. I'm Peggy Alexander. I'm a 70-year-old retiree who is living in Zebulon. My husband and I have lived just down the street here, Judd Street, now for a little over a year. We previously lived in Zebulon about 10 years ago, and we were here for about 5 years until we moved back to Raleigh. And then we had a very substantial offer made to my husband for his duplex close to NC State, which allowed us to buy our home back here in Zebulon, because we really do love it here. We have 2 sons, a daughter-in-law, and 3 cats. And I have listened to everyone tonight, and I've been extremely impressed with what I see here. My husband and I are planning to live in Zebulon, we hope, for the rest of our lives. And I would certainly like to be able to make some sort of a difference in forging ahead with the development of this little town. I do have a background in state government. I worked for the state of North Carolina for almost 25 years. Before retiring, I worked for the Department of Administration. About 17 years of that, I was the assistant director for the North Carolina Council for Women. And as such, I became very familiar with state government, with the politics of the state, and on occasion even had the opportunity, if you call it an opportunity, to speak before the legislature. After that, I did retire, but decided I needed to do something else. So I worked for Walgreens for almost 8 years, and my first Walgreens was right here in Zebulon. And I had not worked in retail before and loved it. Worked with Belks here in Zebulon as well until I went, with the Walgreens full time. But in moving back to Zebulon, I think that we realized that this is a wonderful town. I'm not familiar with all of the terminology that's been mentioned this evening, but all of these presentations have pretty much kept me at rapt attention. It's something I would like to do. I would like to be able to make a difference. I don't know if my background is something you're interested in, but I would certainly do my utmost best to represent this town in going forward. And I really do wish the best for the town and would like to be a part of the community. I need to get out of my comfort zone and do something that I feel like is worthwhile. So I would appreciate it if I could be able to serve on the planning board. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Comments? Thank you. Next, Scott Carpenter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Scott Carpenter. I live at 214 East Horton Street. As many of you know, we recently moved to town, but we've been in the Zebulon scene for about 7.5 years. If you've heard our story, my wife and I selected a home in a small town with that charm, and Zebulon is where we landed. We've been restoring a home that's 110 years old. I live 2 blocks from the center of downtown, where a lot of activity is going on, a block and a half from the railroad tracks. Some of you see my wife and I walking our dog Copper at night. A couple things I'd like you to consider as to how I would be helpful to the planning board. First of all, I live in the area. I'm mindful of that residential setting, the comments that I hear from residents. I see what's going on with the downtown business. I see what's going on with a lot of the growth. I'm one of those people that monitors social media, so I see a lot of the public comments that are out there. Second, I have a PhD in computer science. That just means I can read really complex technical things. I can understand them. I think I speak well. I think I can navigate some complex issues. In my day job, I'm a data scientist. So I let data and facts drive a lot of my decision. When those facts are there, it helps me move beyond concerns and emotions to help think about things in a more data-driven, factual manner. And I would apply those skills to this type of a role. So those are some of the concerns I would like you to be mindful of in my application.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from the board? Thank you. We take a vote.
Yes, you would need nomination or a motion.
For nomination?
Well, you need a motion to appoint someone to this position and a second. Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we appoint Peggy Alexander to the planning board position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Who was nominated?
Peggy
Ms.
Alexander.
Okay, thank you.
Alexander.
Hearing no discussion, we'll do a roll vote, starting with Commissioner Laux.
No.
Commissioner Harrison.
Approve.
Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Miles.
Approve.
Commissioner Baxter.
Approve. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. 4-1.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank the applicants, and I would love to encourage those that have not been appointed to potentially check out the Board of Adjustments as a way to serve. I know that we are continually trying to find folks to fill those spots.
Miles.
How many positions do we have for Board of Adjustments? Do you know?
That are open?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know right off the top of my head. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But we do have spaces open on it, correct?
Absolutely, we do. Just if anyone's interested, just reach out to me and I'll be able to give you that information.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Board rules, procedures. Manager Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the board. Elected bodies of quickly growing towns often consider adopting rules to assist them in how they conduct meetings and consider policies. The board has commented on 2 drafts that could be the first 2 sections of a proposed rules of procedure for the Zebulon Board of Commissioners. The first section focused on how the agenda of a public meeting is set, and the second section clarifies the roles of the meeting's presiding officer. Highlights of the attached procedure include a deadline for receipt of the regular meeting agenda packet, a method for adding items to an agenda, both in advance of the meeting's agenda being posted publicly, as well as at the time of the meeting itself. And the schedule that's put before you in the proposed regulations or rules of procedure allows a detailed agenda preview as you witnessed this past month as part of your monthly meetings. So the discussion before the board is whether they want to adopt the rules of procedure and specifically what method of voting to employ to add items to an agenda at the time of the meeting. And we've given the board 3 options, either majority, supermajority, or unanimous. With that, I'm available to answer any questions the board may have.
Questions from the board? Commissioner Miles?
Just want to make sure. So this reads that we will get a draft agenda a week before the regular meeting with the final version still 4 days before the regular meeting, right? Just want to make sure that. And I'm in agreement with this compromise. I agree with this compromise, knowing it's a living document and can be amended. So I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Baxter?
I'd like to see the addition of items by a majority, not by a supermajority. Unanimous.
That be part of the motion or separate?
I'm just talking out loud right now.
What section are you talking about? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I make the notes
The
correctly.
3rd paragraph up from the bottom, it gives us selections.
Yes, I see it. All right, thank you.
Mayor, to your point, when the board is ready to make a recommendation, we do need clarification on that in the motion.
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Harrison?
I don't have, the only thing I was concerned about was those 3 things, but we have that taken care of.
Miles?
I like the idea of you being able to add an item to the agenda for at least discussion purposes, regardless of a majority or supermajority. Otherwise, a topic cannot be brought up.
I just had one.
Miles?
Regarding consent, the introduction of new policy or revised policy are technically non-controversial. However, I feel it is in all of our best interests from the town from the town of Zebulon to the citizens to have majority change, any changes of policies or introduction of new policy not be listed in the consent items.
Can you say that?
Just basically that when we introduce any new policies like we're doing, there were some policies in the consent tonight. I think just as we're growing that we need to look at each policy individual and kind of discuss those, whether big or small, they are policies that we're putting in place.
For example, the Parks and Rec one that we brought into discussion. I agree with that.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Do we have a sample motion?
I move to approve the rules of procedure with the verbiage simple majority in the paragraph relating to agenda approval and adding an agenda item.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Discussion.
Who seconded?
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion.
I just want to make sure that the policy part is put in there for us consent-wise, that no policy will be passed, put into consent. I don't know where that needs to go in there.
Well, there's a couple of ways you could approach it.
Okay, please.
One, because Commissioner Baxter has already introduced a motion and it has been seconded, she would have to amend, and then the second would have to amend their motion. The other way, more easier, is just we as a staff will just take that as guidance that if there's a new policy, we just won't put that on consent.
I think I want to see it in writing for me. If we amend that, let's get it in writing.
Sure, I'll amend that.
Thank you.
So I'd like to amend my motion still for approval, but with consideration of the consent agenda, having specifically listed that no policy items be added to the consent agenda, and the simple majority be the way that in addition to the agenda is approved on the night of.
That's a whole lot. And
Close my eyes. Like, what?
And
It just happened.
And I think Commissioner Miles said new policy, didn't you?
New policy and just policy, anything.
Just
policy in general.
policy in general, just
correct.
not new policy. Okay.
Where new policy is part of it. Anything that could pertains to, we're putting something new into place policy-wise, not to go and consider a change in policy, anything.
Okay. Just policy.
Correct.
Okay. Could you
So that was my motion.
is there a, would she have to rescind her second?
Have to agree to the amendment to the motion.
Commissioner Harrison.
I have a question. Okay, so when you say that no, you don't want policy put on consent, what if the policy, if we've already gone over the policy, we've tabled the policy, they have edited it, and it is what we have said we wanted it to be, can it then be on consent if it has been corrected, like it has been brought back?
I think what it is just that where we're at now, policy, anything putting rules and regulations in place for the citizens of Zebulon, that we at least address it, whether it's on a brief moment. We don't have to go in, if we've already set the discussion, we know it's going to be a fast thing. I mean, we can move along, get it, kind of go ahead and prove it. So put it that way, I don't think it's going to hurt us at all.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. Know second. I second.
You agree to the amendment to the motion?
I agree to the amendment of the motion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion.
And this pertains to board policy only, correct?
What Park and Rec is putting in tonight, we had policy and consent tonight.
Yeah, it would be Board of Commissioner policy only, correct?
Right.
I don't understand what your question is. I'm so
There are a
sorry.
lot of different policies. I just wanted to clarify what you're saying is we're only talking about Board of Commissioner policy that governs us.
Oh, no, I was talking about any policy any policy change or amendment that was coming before us, just asking it not to be put into consent, even if we've already discussed it. It can be something that we don't even get a presentation on, but we just actually take the vote on it in, the meeting itself.
So that would be all policy?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any further discussion on the re-second? Are we clear, Madam Clerk? Are we ready for a vote? Start with Commissioner Laux. Roll. Commissioner Harrison? Favor. Commissioner Clark?
Favor.
Commissioner Miles? Favor. Commissioner Baxter?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion passes. Motion passes.
Mayor, I believe we're missing a slide. The next on your agenda is the budget adjustment for fire station sleeping quarters. I recognize Chief Perry.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and board members. In development of the FY23 budget, we recognize that with the addition of more staff at the fire station, we would further outgrow our current facility. So the FY23 budget included a project to expand some of the living quarters within our existing fire station, which would bridge the gap between where we're at today and a new fire station being constructed. The total budget was developed with that in mind. Recently, we received bids for the construction portion of that project and found that the bids received were well outside our budget. So we went back and looked at several different alternatives and options to try to accomplish what we needed to do so. However, we found that those were not viable options, as some were equally as expensive or some extended response times outside of what we were looking for and what we're trying to improve. So the budget amendment in front of you tonight reworks the budget for this project and to provide the necessary allocation based on that lowest bid that was submitted. And I'll available to answer any questions you may have.
Comments from the board? Commissioner Baxter?
Okay, so this is doubling what we initially thought it was going to be. Not quite. And so you may be able to answer this, but maybe actually Sheila might have a better idea, because I know at some point we're going to want to do something else with this fire station, and the improvements, that extra $200,000, are we going to see value down the road as opposed to $420 whatever $1,000 for a 3-year Band-Aid?
Yeah, and not knowing the future use of the building, that's a very difficult question. Personally, I think that the things we have proposed do provide more function in the building, because it opens up some spaces that are somewhat closed up. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is open those up. They're a little bit tight. And it provides some ways to transition through the building that we don't have today. So we've provided more functionality. I think the difficult part would be, does that coincide with any future use? If Sheila has any ideas of what the future use is going to be, she's welcome to.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Your Park Street Master Plan did identify the current fire station when they do relocate, if that building were to become vacant and you still agree. It was identified to be a facility to support recreation downtown and just general park operations and programming, offer some event type space, as well as the potential for public outdoor accessible restrooms for when we do these big events. Some of them, you won't necessarily have to have porta-johns all the time, or just people that are walking along the greenway would have access to restrooms. When you have the downtown park, which if you choose to put that where the master plan says would be at the EMS location, it would service that facility as well. So I haven't specifically looked at the plans that they've developed, but I would imagine that some of the changes that they are making are to enhance the office space and also to enhance the infrastructure of like plumbing and electrical. And I would imagine would probably have to be changed, but it also may be things that could be utilized as you expand that building. But without looking at what he has and without having specific drawings, it's really hard to say what that gain or loss would be.
Thank you.
Yes.
Harry, is this going back to, this is just completing the project with the plans that were originally drawn up?
That is correct.
Without any of those changes or cost-saving measures besides maybe some slapping some paint or whatever?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-15.
I second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. We have a roll vote. Commissioner Laux?
In favor?
Commissioner Harrison? Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Commissioner Baxter? Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting schedule. Meeting schedule.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of the board. The proposed meeting schedule for FY24, so fiscal year 24, for those watching, is July 1st of 2023 to June 30th of 2024. That schedule that's before you closely follows the same monthly frequency and times approved that you approved in the FY23 meeting schedule, but introduces a time change for regular meetings. So specifically, regular meetings, as far as the frequency, of course, unless there's a holiday, will still be on the first Monday. The proposed meeting time, though, is to move that from 7 o'clock up to 6 o'clock. The work sessions and the mini retreats, however, remain the same. Work sessions will remain the third Thursday, beginning at 2, and mini retreats remain on the fourth Thursday for those times in the spring, January, February, March, and the fall, August, September, and October, with kickoff times at 9, generally running to 4. So the discussion before the board is whether to adopt the attached FY24 meeting schedule. Staff also will put before the board for discussion that they may be interested in wanting to move up the regular meeting time for the remainder of their FY23 schedule from 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So that would mean that would become effective in January 2023. And Commissioner Baxter also introduced something else that the board may want to consider, and I'll leave that for her to describe about changing the work session timeframes. So again, we're looking for approval of the FY24 meeting schedule, and then you all can consider whether you want to make additional changes to your FY23 meeting schedule. We stand available for any questions you may have.
I don't have any questions, but my comment is that for the remainder of fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, I'd like to see the work sessions at 6 p.m., having them at 2 p.m. It will make it's prohibitive for me to continually take full days out of my life. And it's going to be prohibitive to people who would like to run and still have a full-time job in the future, for them to be able to do so if they're being asked to take off 6 full days for mini retreats, and then an additional 12 days, at least half days, for work sessions. We want to make sure that we have an inclusive body sitting on this board. We need to make sure that everyone, not just myself, has a reasonable schedule
Commissioner Harrison?
Well, I agree with making sure that we have, the diversity in times. However, as someone that I think I'm a minority on the board with little people, 2 o'clock, the earlier the work sessions begin, or the better, because it allows for time in the evenings as well. So I'm not opposed to moving it up at all, but I think maybe 4 instead of 2, or something like that. But 6, because we've seen 6-7 hour meetings. I think in the same realm of making sure that we have a diverse group of people that come and we are being inclusive to everyone, we also, take into consideration people with smaller, younger families.
Commissioner Laux?
I'm happy to say as a retiree, I'm flexible, but as a full-time employee, I couldn't have done the 2 o'clock myself. So I'm for moving it later in the day. Is 4 or 5 workable?
5 is workable.
Okay, maybe 5 is a good compromise.
Commissioner Clark?
4 o'clock the best.
Miles?
I'd just like to read a statement I had regarding work section. I understand why this seems reasonable, but it ultimately will exclude a large portion of the citizens from being able to participate in meetings and possibly from running to be a commissioner. Someone who works another job will have to take off at least a day and a half from work each month to fulfill their commissioner duties, and many do not have that luxury. I would like to keep work sessions scheduled at 6 p.m., knowing we can vote on moving the time, kind of like what we're doing now on a need basis, kind of what we're doing now, discussing. Well, I have one more statement in reference as well. If we're going to consider going to an 18-month calendar because of growth, another reasonable response to addressing growth and issues to use July as a regular work month, we're essentially missing out on an entire month of town business by taking that month off. I believe the town would be better served by us not taking off July off all meetings. Any thoughts from my fellow commissioners?
I've been in agreement with
Commissioner Baxter?
I agree with that, even if it means that we are using that additional time as a work session or as part of our retreat process.
Commissioner Laux?
I've been in agreement with that for 3 years.
Okay. Commissioner Harrison?
I am not in agreement with that. I think that we need, as well as everyone involved needs this to recharge and to bring what we have left for the end of the year. I think the break is needed. I think it's needed, but yeah.
Commissioner Clark?
I agree with the Commissioner Harrison.
Commissioner Miles?
At the rate that we're growing now, we all hear that we're growing pains and growing. To take an entire month off at the rate we're going, it can be possibly changed later on, but right now where we're at, I think it's very important that we don't miss the entire month of just kind of the people's business. We will put this, we know when we made that commitment that we have to be here.
Commissioner, you done?
Yes, sir.
I agree, but as we were just talking about, growth and making sure that we have the diversity and the inclusivity and all of those good things. So when we're looking at taking a break and taking a moment, I think that understanding what comes along with everything that we're doing and saying that we are public servants and that's what's expected of us. Well, so is the times that we're taking off work, the 6 months or the 2 months here. Like that's what's expected of me, and I knew that as a public servant coming in. So those are just my thoughts. I think that it's needed.
Would a better option be to move to a twice a month meeting schedule then? And continue to keep July open and free, but that way we could at least be addressing things on a more regular basis as they come up.
Harrison?
Thank you. I think that we stay in our, well, no. I don't think that moving it to twice a month is going to be conducive.
I just think it's important, like I said, for me, that July month, that 30 days, I know this as my first term as a commissioner, and that I felt a little bit kind of like out of the loop that 30 days. There was information that I felt we needed when that next meeting came along, and I was trying to play catch up somewhat. I was on top of things, but there was time for some information that I felt, had we not taken that 30 days off, I would have felt more comfortable with that.
Commissioner Laos?
Compromise I believe we've done in the past is we scheduled a July meeting with the understanding we would cancel it if there was no business.
I like that.
Commissioner Baxter?
I'm ready to make a motion.
I don't know if is this the time when I need to change the schedule for the retreat for February?
What I would recommend is just to break it into different sections. There's obviously some concerns about the 23 schedule. So what I would recommend is dispatch with the discussion on the FY24 meeting schedule first, and then you can come back and revisit anything to change with the FY23 schedule.
So are we ready for a motion for the FY24 meeting schedule?
I have some information that might be valuable, just for consideration. So 2 things that I heard is potentially doubling up on meetings. One of the things that you've started to see is we're starting to use your work session as that second meeting. So we're bringing items to you for you to vote on. So your work sessions are starting to become places where you're starting to conduct business, and that still will be available to you. The idea of conducting business in July, it simply will not happen. That's the beginning of the fiscal year. I will tell you, staff is coming off of a very taxing budget season, and they are cooked, but also they have provided all the information they have to provide to you. So there won't be any pressing policy, any direction that's needed in the July timeframe. And finally, your development community recognizes that they are focused on different things at that time of year. They're not coming before you for plan approval. So just wanted you all to understand a July meeting really is not going to produce anything for you. It's the beginning of the fiscal year. Staff has presented everything that it needs to. The development community doesn't have anything pressing. That's those are the reasons that we recommend not meeting in July.
Commissioner Miles?
So I'm to take that the second fastest growing municipality in North Carolina, growing at a rate of 7 people per day, we will not have business in the month of July as that rate that we're growing.
I also feel uncomfortable.
Commissioner Baxter?
I feel uncomfortable that Joe has intonated in any way that our staff wouldn't be able to do it. We have some of the best staff in North Carolina. I think that absolutely they could handle something like that.
I did not intimate anything. I just work with that staff closely, and I know how tired they are and how long of hours they work and how everyone feels at the conclusion of the budget season.
Is anyone ready to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that, well, I guess we're doing 24 first?
24 first,
okay.
yes.
All right, well, go ahead.
No, I'm asking, is the board ready, anyone ready to make a motion?
I can make
Prompt.
I can make a motion that we amend the FY24 regular meeting schedule to include a tentative July meeting date and to revert the work session meetings to at least 5 p.m.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mayor, the July time needs to call a specific date.
Got a calendar.
I do, just one moment. It would be the 10th of July, please.
Amended to say the 10th of July.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
Discussion? Roll vote. Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Harrison? Commissioner Laux?
Favor.
Commissioner Baxter?
Favor?
Commissioner Miles? Favor. Motion passes 4-1.
To consider any changes to the FY23 meeting schedule, this might be the good time to do that.
Yes, I have a conflict February 23, 24. That's the North Carolina Mayors Association meeting.
In addition, I believe that one of our board members will be at ALC for the February meeting, and I'd like to open it up for consideration of a different date.
That's correct. I have a conflict with the February 6th date for our Board of Commissioner meeting. I'll be in the advanced leadership class that entire week.
On this schedule.
Can we double up the following week? Is that possible for everyone?
What's
The 13th?
The 13th is a joint public hearing night.
Correct, but like, can we put another one in that week?
Oh, that week, not that night.
Not that day.
No, not, oh my gosh, no, please, I'm not suggesting that. No, just another day during that week.
Well, not for the 14th.
The 14th?
The Tuesday.
No. Oh, not the 14th.
It's Valentine's Day.
Oh.
Well, I was, but you know, I love working here. Does the 15th work?
It's a camp. Is that a campo?
I can't remember.
That's on a Wednesday. Campo's Wednesdays.
Campus Wednesday, so then the 16th would be the Thursday?
Commissioner, Manager Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. Just something that might ease just from a logistics standpoint. You already have a meeting scheduled for February 16th. Just keep that meeting. That's a work session. And what we can do is we can introduce regular meeting business at that time. And then we just recommend canceling February 23rd. And we'll look to make up anything that we need to, either at the January mini retreat or the March mini retreat.
You mean to cancel February 7th?
February 23rd and 24th, the retreat, is what he was recommending canceling.
Yeah, I have a mayor's meeting, 23rd, 24th.
Okay, and so you wanted to change it to a different day?
Yeah.
Okay, like the 21st and 22nd?
Get some dates brought back to us that will.
That's what I'm proposing. Just you already have on your schedule the 16th. Just keep the 16th, and we'll bring forward information that we would have introduced on the 23rd and 24th. And if we need to schedule additional time, we'll bring you back additional dates. But what I'm suggesting for the board to consider is just cancel the 23rd and 24th.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes, sir.
I move to cancel the meeting on February, or move the meeting on February 7th to February 16th. That's correct, Joe?
Well,
No.
no.
It would be, you're canceling the meeting on the 6th. You already have a meeting on the 16th.
So it doesn't need to be changed verbally to a Board of Commissioners meeting from a work session?
Is a regular meeting.
Okay.
You'll just be doing regular business at that meeting versus what you normally do is
Okay.
a discussion. You'll miss out on a work session for the month of February.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so to be clear, you're canceling the meeting February 6th.
Yep.
You're canceling the retreat on the 23rd and 24th. the meeting that you already have scheduled, which is a work session on the 16th, will just stand, and it'll just be a beefier meeting.
Does she need to repeat that motion?
Yeah, no, because I had said, for whatever reason, February 7th anyway, which isn't correct. So I move to cancel the meeting on February 6th, as well as February 23rd and 24th.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll vote. Commissioner Laux? Commissioner Harrison? Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Miles? Favor. Commissioner Baxter?
Favor.
Thank you.
And the last, Commissioner Baxter brought up the idea of moving the work sessions later in the FY24 schedule. Right now, that's scheduled for 2 o'clock for the FY23 schedule. So if they want to reconsider that, we'll need a motion for that as well.
What was the time? Was it 4 or 5?
5, I'd make a motion to move the work sessions for the remainder of FY23 to 5 p.m.
I second.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion.
Wait, Joe said 24. Did you mean 24 or 23,
He said
Joe?
23 just then.
We just did 24.
Just did 24 before.
All right. Thank you. That's all.
Discussion. Roll vote. Commissioner Baxter? Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Commissioner Clark?
Approved.
Commissioner Harrison?
Favor.
Commissioner Laux? Motion passes. Thank you.
As Parks and Rec Director Sheila Long to speak to the issue that was pulled off of consent.
Parks suspension. Long.
And members of the board, before you tonight was consideration of a suspension ordinance for use of parks and programs. And this was following a recommendation from our town attorney and some observations and experiences that they had had. And so they recommended that a suspension ordinance be considered by the town. We have prepared, based off of what the town attorney has recommended for us as a draft. We made minor edits to reflect the town of Zebulon. We also took it to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, where it was unanimously recommended for approval. Following a hold, they had questions. There was actually interest in making it a little bit more strict, or have the ability to be a little bit more strict. And we followed up with them based on their questions after speaking with the town attorney. We want to be very careful not to violate any individual's rights, and so we went back to them with the original recommendation. I'm available to answer any questions.
Commissioner Miles.
I think what I have is, I'll read what I have here. Is this a reactionary measure or a proactive measure? Meaning, have we had issues where people should have been suspended, but we didn't have policy in place, or is it just in case?
Proactive. In all of my years of working in this industry, I really couldn't tell you how many times this was actually used. I haven't issued a suspension letter to anybody since I've been here as director. It's something that we don't seek to do.
Thank you. Next is, I noticed there's no explanation as to what constitutes a violation worthy of a park suspension. So my concern is that this could be used as arbitrary, useless Unless we define and even give a list of violations that could lead to a park suspension.
I think the challenge that you find there is you couldn't possibly think of all of the things that people would potentially do in a park or could potentially do in a program. I'm gonna take, unfortunately, I'll take you to the example of what happened at the parade in Raleigh. There were things that you thought you had everything in place, but at the end of the day, something happened, and you had to make decisions. Communities had to make decisions all across the state very quickly to keep community members safe. And while that is a very extreme and upsetting situation, it's just an example of you can't possibly have a list of every possible thing you're going to experience. And so the important thing is that you're fair and consistent and that you don't abuse opportunities like this. And I think that's also important why we've included a way to appeal it. As I mentioned, in my years, I really couldn't tell you how many times this has actually been utilized. Because typically we're going to follow general good practice of our industry. So verbal warnings, talking to participants, trying to come to a resolution, because the last thing we want to do is for a community member not to participate in our programs or to use our park. So I understand where you're coming from. I understand that desire, but I think it would put you in a box where then you wouldn't be able to respond to situations in real time that might be necessary.
Thank you. One last thing. Is there a reason why the decision to suspend a person or a group of persons is left up to one person, and why the appeal process is also just left solely up to one person? I'm thinking in terms that a jury is more preferred than a judge. Could we have the appeal process, if not initial sentencing ruling, use Park and Rec Advisory Board or the Board of Commissioners or something like that to determine the suspension?
I think that's your utilization of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board or the Board of Commissioners would not happen quick enough. I'm going to take the example of summer camp. So you have a kid that comes in on Monday and fights another kid. So I let them come back the next day because I haven't had an opportunity to consult with or pull together a Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting and for them to review it. So we're going to have to be able to be reactionary. And I think it goes back to this isn't something that we take lightly. Any situation where you are going to see the Parks and Rec Department suspend somebody from a park, I can guarantee you the police department was involved in it from the very beginning. We're not going to do that lightly.
Okay, and then just make sure the town manager has the final say on that, correct? The way I read it.
They would be able to appeal it, so the decision that would come, they could appeal it. There's a period of time where they could appeal to the town manager if they felt that whatever suspension that was shared was not just and fair.
Thank you. That was all my concern, sir.
Commissioner Baxter.
I just have two questions.
Yes.
There are two areas where there are end quotes but no start quotes. Was that done on purpose? Is this whole body supposed to be in quotes but this little part not?
What happened there is when my department originally prepared this, we prepared it in coordination with the attorney's office in the format of a resolution, and that it was decided that it really should be an ordinance. And so I think the transition of a resolution to an ordinance, because in a resolution you would have those quotations throughout the document, and I think that that is probably what transpired there, that in the transition of one to the other, the quotation just got missed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miles?
Just thank you for that clarification, because I sent an email earlier asking the same questions. You kind of said the same thing. Thank you, Sheila.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Laux?
I applaud you for being proactive.
Eric for letting us know.
We need a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the suspension ordinance 2023-16.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Commissioner
Did you-
Baxter?
Yes, did you already make the adjustment to take out the quotes then?
I did print a copy for y'all. However, it's an administrative thing that we can change after you adopt it.
Cool, that's all I wanted to know.
Any more discussion? Commissioner Laux? Commissioner Harrison? Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Miles?
Favor.
Commissioner Baxter?
Favor.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board comments? Commissioner Laux?
Three quickies. First of all, I want to thank everyone involved with the Christmas parade, from GSK as a sponsor, the Chamber, the ambassadors, the volunteers, the civic groups, the town staff and departments, and most of all for the citizens who watched us drive by. Second of all, I would like to thank Commissioner Baxter for getting the 100-county quilt in the Debenham store window. If you've not seen it, please stop by. It is beautiful. And third, I'd like to thank the town staff and everyone involved for getting the weather camera up and running. I've already heard a lot of favorable comments. We're really showing off the town hall. Great promotional.
Commissioner Harrison?
Ditto to Commissioner Baxter about the quilt. I walked by. It really is beautiful. If you all haven't seen it, you should. It's beautiful and it's historic. A special thank you to all of you who had a part in Candy Cane Lane. I went up to Sheila and I told her, I said, Sheila, you did such a great job. Thank you so much. And she said, no, thank Amy Hayden. She is the one who really worked hard. So I want to say thank you to Amy and everyone that was a part of that, as well as the parade. Just continuing the sentiments of Commissioner Laux. Thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
And I would like to say the parade was great. It was nice to have it back in town. The weather held out for us, and it was nice to see all the citizens come out and line the streets.
Commissioner Baxter?
Yeah, the parade was fantastic. It was wonderful, even with the weather, to see how many people were out there despite it being a potential rain situation. It was lovely to be able to say hello to some folks that I hadn't seen in a while, just because they were at the parade. So I'm so glad that we are now consistently creating events that people want to attend. That's pretty exciting. Candy Cane Lane was another example of a well put together and well thought out event. And I looked forward to how these events are going to evolve in the future. Because even, just with Candy Cane Lane and it's, what is this, Sheila, the second iteration of it, it's already vastly improved from, its prior. So that's so wonderful. The 100-county quilt is up at Debenhams. Jim and I spent Saturday morning washing the windows to make sure that you could see inside. So now just everything else in my life falls through. I've got one more skill that I can fall back on. It's window washer. Might have to get over some fear of heights, but I'm willing to try. I'm gonna miss Bob Matheny. I'm gonna miss him so much. He was such an institution. A good person, a kind heart. And when he said, Shannon, you and I don't always agree, it was always, every single time, said out of love. He didn't make decisions that I always agreed with, but I always knew where his heart stood. He is leaving a hole in this community that it will take many people to fill. I'm so grateful for the guidance and the mentorship and his willingness to embrace the board and meet with us with whatever question or confidence that we might have. He was always there for me. I knew Bob in a slightly different version of himself than some of you guys knew him, because we're both beekeepers. And so I had the honor of knowing him in a different way. And from the times that Larry and I sat on the porch and talked with him, I will never forget those times. They have really helped define my character as a commissioner. And I'm so very grateful to him.
Thank you.
I'm not done yet,
Oh.
though. If you want to go, and I can just, if you can come back.
Commissioner Miles?
First, I want to give a huge shout out to the Zebulon Town staff and the Zebulon Chamber of Commerce. A few drops of rain couldn't stop them from putting on one of the Zebulon best Christmas parades ever. Keeping in the holiday spirit, Todd LLC, the same amazing folks who put on the biggest bonfire on earth every Thanksgiving weekend, is hosting a Christmas blessing at Todd's Park on Saturday, December 17th, starting at 9 a.m. with toys, food, Santa, and more. If this isn't anything less than a year event, if you weren't here that last event, please be sure not to miss it. I would also like to pay tribute to our former mayor. He was a staple in Zebulon, and his countless contributions are seen throughout the town and will never be forgotten. Thank you, Mayor Matheny, for all you have done. Your family is in my thoughts and prayers. Lastly, I would like to honor another lifelong Zebulonian of 98 years who is very near and dear to my heart and is also sadly no longer with us. This woman was a pillar of strength, love, and support and wisdom, and she meant the world to me. She was fearless in her beliefs and unwavering in her love and support for her family, God, and Zebulon. Her fortitude paved the way for me in endless ways. She is the reason I am who I am today and why I'm here. The woman is my grandmother, Miss Mary Miles, and I acknowledge my 365 days as a commissioner in the town where she lived for 35,770 days. I am humbled and honored to carry her name and legacy. Thank you.
I have one final thing. Thanks. So just prior to the November board meeting, I received information about a potential conflict of interest involving a member of the planning board, Mr. Michael Germano, and the matter of a rezoning recommendation before the board. I had no time to do any research into this concern prior to the meeting, but felt it my duty as a decision maker in this community to at least inform the board. My statement acknowledged that I was unaware of the validity or invalidity of the information that I had received, but felt that the board should know what I had been presented with. While my statement was not a slanderous one, as I clearly made it known that I did not have proof one way or the other, it quite naturally upset Mr. Germano, and for that, I'm heartily sorry. In saying that, and with my conversations with the attorney, I think that it is prudent for me to retract any statement concerning the information that I was given at that meeting involving a conflict of interest, as I don't believe the town wants to spend resources doing any investigation in that arena. I did not respond to Mr. Germano's letter until this board meeting because I knew that this is where I would address it. I thought that in a public arena rather than in a letter would make more impact. I will always bring information before the board that I feel will help us to make the best decisions for this town, because that is absolutely what Zebulon deserves. But if I have made Mr. Germano upset, I regret that.
Commissioner Miles?
Not in, just making a statement, during that meeting, you didn't call a name, so I just want that to be put out there. You didn't call out a name specifically. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying and respect what you're doing, but you did not call out a name, so
Mr. Germano took it upon himself to identify as that person, even though I had not called out any specific name. So.
Thank you. I just want to thank the staff for their last-minute efforts in changing some of the policies about the parade because of the incident we had. That was some quick work. It was some good work. And it made me sleep a little easier that night, knowing that we had some different policies in place and that the staff was implementing along with the Chamber of Commerce. You can never anticipate what might happen in a situation like a parade because it is very vulnerable for safety is concerned. But I think we made a great effort, and I applaud the staff for their work that they did with that. Public Works, Fire, Police, Parks and Recs. Thank you. Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. To piggyback on that, we had a lot of really good work being done behind the scenes, proactively, diligently, so thank you for recognizing that. A couple of meetings coming up next week. Next Monday will be a joint public hearing. A couple of notable development plans will come before you. One on Wakeland Mills. That is a development between the end of Judd Street out to Worth Hinton. And then another development will come before the board and the planning board at that joint public hearing called the Wall Purdy Tract. That is a parcel of land located northwest and adjacent to Weaver's Pond. So a couple of big developments coming in. And then on the work session, which is Thursday of next week, the 15th, you'll be presented with your annual audit. You'll be presented with information about the very popular Go Wake Transit to give you some insight about how that's being used in your community and what its future is. And in keeping with how we are rolling out quarterly reports differently, you'll receive your Parks and Rec quarterly report at that work session as well. And with that, that concludes the manager's report.
Any other board comments?
Do we have a schedule for January? You usually hand out that one calendar sheet. No?
I can email it to you.
Okay, that'd be
fine.
awesome. Thank you.
will we all get that? Can you email it to us?
To a whole board.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Yes,
No, sir.
Now we will need a motion to go into closed session as allowed per NC General Statutes 143-318.
Make a motion.
.11.
Oh, sorry about that.
A5, to instruct the town staff a negotiating agent concerning the position to be taken on behalf of the town in a negotiating price and other material terms of the contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease. I need a motion to
So
go.
moved.
Second.
Okay. And